First of all, tonight we go inside the Canterbury Home Repair Program in an extraordinary interview with a man who supervised day-to-day operations in Christchurch for 4 years after 2011's big February quake. Last night we heard from the former Fletcher Construction CEO who signed the contract with EQC, which put Fletcher's in charge of the program with an EQC indemnity against, and I quote directly from the contract, all costs and expenses FCC may suffer and for any claims made against FCC. Verbatim quote. Mark Binns told us some of the early EQC scopes. That's the original damage assessments were done too quickly and by people not qualified to do them. Now, Gerry Brownlee won't talk to Checkpoint directly, but last night RNZ's Christchurch-based reporter Conan Young asked him to respond to Mark Binns.
I wouldn't make a comment on anything that Mr Binns has said because I haven't seen those comments. I would simply say this, though, that under the arrangements, if a builder was assigned a property to repair and they picked up the scope of works and in the course of doing that work discovered further damage, then they would simply have that work rescoped. That happened in numerous cases because it was never expected, given the scale of what we were dealing with, that you would get perfect scopes on every occasion.
Gerry Brownlee, in short, there was a safety net. If EQC's scopes were wrong, and no one's disputing they sometimes were, contractors would find the damage and change the scopes accordingly. But this works manager, who didn't want to be named, said once they'd been filed, the EQC scopes were very hard to change.
Correct. So, those initial scopes, and unfortunately they should have been called a triage scope. It was a scope to get a real snapshot of the damage in Christchurch and then triage it into different piles. So those which were going to be repaired under EQC's management and those who were going to be repaired which were overcap and were going to be repaired and managed by the insurance company. Those scopes, they weren't 100% accurate. They weren't good scopes to work off later. And that was a real frustration because, the public weren't told that they were a triage scope. They were told that this was the repairs required to their homes. Yeah. So later on, when we got those scopes in Fletcher EQR, we went out with contractors and, of course, the damage didn't match. There was additional damage or what, the builders saw and the supervisors saw was quite different. So, those scopes would be rewritten and then they'd have to go back to EQC to be reviewed, and often, what was added was knocked back. It was a frustrating process.
Yes, and the EQC annual report for 2010-2011, which I'm holding here, says in the 4 months after the February quake, 182,000 rapid assessments were completed. 182,000, it's an extraordinary number. Now, you're saying they were snapshots, triage. But what you're also saying is that these rapid assessments became attached to the property and it was very hard to get a variation on them. Correct.
One of the things which you couldn't do would be invasive scoping. So you couldn't actually lift floorboards or take a wall lining off to see what was damaged behind it.
Why not?
Why not? Just because there wasn't time, really. But that was the only way you could discover what was there. And often, this is why scopes changed during the process. Repair was that when the builder did open up that wall and there was additional damage, then there had to be a variation to that scope.
Were builders walking away from projects or signing off on projects knowing that in fact the work that had been scoped and formally agreed to was insufficient?
I would say yes. Yeah, and that is frustrating. I mean, there should have been a lot more chipboard replaced in Christchurch than what there is. And chipboard is a one-off use product. When it goes through a event like that, it's done its job.
Sorry, forgive me for interrupting, but absolutely. Are you saying chipboard wasn't replaced? Are you saying it was nailed back up or plastered when there was major cracks or splits in it?
Correct. Yep. Some was replaced. I mean, we didn't get the opportunity to get a property file to look at the plans of the house to see where bracing units were in walls to make sure that they were put back correctly, things like that.
Were your KPIs, were all the drivers you were working under around how many properties were being done, the speed with which they were being done? Correct.
Yeah. So the supervisors, and it got worse, 2013, 2014, and I left in 2015, but the KPIs each month were huge, and it became a dollar thing. We had to, in the hub, we had to be doing $3 or $4 million worth of work a month, and when you broke that down to each supervisor, they had to be signing off X number of jobs of X value each month so that the hub could meet that. The frustrations were there right from the beginning, and it's I know that supervisors and good supervisors, good managers left because of the frustration that there was there.
One final question. When you hear now of properties in which major structural damage, particularly under the floors, is only just being discovered, despite the fact there were scopes, despite the fact that the EQC repairs have been completed, are you surprised that that is only being discovered now, 7 years on?
No, I'm not surprised, to be honest, John. As in any build, there's good builders and bad builders, and any organisation, there's good people and bad people. Those who will take the shortcuts and those who won't. There just wasn't a lot of information in those early years, 2011, 2012. It was very much a fly-by-wire, very frustrating, it was a very challenging time for all involved, on all sides. Yeah.
That's a former works manager inside the Canterbury Home Repair Program talking to us earlier.